Henry Garner wasn't a stranger to the quiet hours. In fact, he preferred them. The world was simpler when the rest of it was asleep. No emails, no deadlines, just the comforting hum of his workshop and the satisfying click of tools against metal. Tonight, he was locked in a battle of wits with an ancient coffee maker that had stubbornly refused to brew anything other than a faint smell of despair. "Come on, you miserable pile of plastic," Henry muttered, poking at its innards with a screwdriver. "Work with me here. You and I both know you're better than instant coffee." The coffee maker, predictably, said nothing. The knock came just as he was considering giving up and joining the ranks of instant coffee drinkers. It wasn't a polite knock, nor was it a loud, insistent one. It was odd, a soft, resonant sound, as though someone had tapped a crystal glass against his workshop window. Henry froze. His first thought was raccoons. His second thought was burglars, and his third thought, embarrassingly, was aliens, an idea he quickly dismissed as the caffeine-deprived ramblings of a tired brain. Still, curiosity got the better of him. He stood, screwdriver still in hand, and approached the window. Outside, the night was dark and quiet, the kind of suburban stillness that made every creak of a floorboard sound like a gunshot. He peered through the glass and almost dropped the screwdriver. The woman, or at least the figure, standing outside was unlike anything he'd ever seen. She was tall, with skin that shimmered like molten silver under the faint glow of his porch light. Her eyes were large and luminous, reflecting the light in a way that was both mesmerizing and unnerving. Her hair, if it could be called that, seemed to flow and shift like liquid mercury, defying gravity as it moved. Henry blinked, then he blinked again. When the figure didn't vanish like a trick of the light, he opened the window just enough to poke his head out. Hi?" he ventured. "Can I help you?" The figure tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like an insect under a microscope. "You are Henry Garner," she said. Her voice was musical, layered, as though multiple notes were being played at once. Yeah, that's me." He tightened his grip on the screwdriver. "Who's asking?" "My name is Celira," she said, her tone calm but carrying a weight of urgency. "I am not of your world. I require your assistance." Henry stared at her. Then he laughed, a short, nervous bark that sounded more like a hiccup. "Okay, very funny. Is this one of those prank shows? Did Jeff put you up to this? Because if he did, tell him he owes me a new coffee maker." Celira didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. "This is no jest," she said, her luminous eyes narrowing slightly. "My people are in grave peril, and you possess the knowledge and skills necessary to save us." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Lady, I'm an engineer. I fix machines. You might have the wrong guy." "I do not," she said firmly. "Uh-huh." He crossed his arms. "Okay, let's say I believe you. Which, spoiler alert, I don't. Why me? Why not, I don't know, Elon Musk or someone with an actual space resume?" Celira tilted her head again, as if considering his question. "Elon Musk is busy," she said after a moment. "Also, his contributions to interstellar technology are largely overstated." Henry snorted. "Okay, now I'm listening." Celira stepped closer, her silver skin catching the light in a way that made her seem otherworldly and ethereal. She held up a small spherical device that began to glow softly. A moment later, a three-dimensional projection sprang to life above it, showing a planet bathed in shifting hues of blue and green. It was beautiful, but the image quickly shifted to show cracks, spiderwebbing across its surface, as though the planet itself was breaking apart. "This is my home, Xynthia," she said, her voice quieter now. "Our energy core is failing. Without it, our planet cannot sustain life. Your expertise in mechanical systems is our best hope." Henry frowned, staring at the projection. Despite himself, he felt a pang of something that might have been concern, or at least curiosity. "Okay, but I'm not exactly NASA material. I'm just a guy who fixes toasters and coffee makers." "Your humility is noted," Solera said dryly, "but your skills are sufficient. I have researched extensively. You are uniquely qualified." "Uniquely qualified," he echoed, still skeptical. "And what if I say no?" Solera's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle shift in her tone. "Then my people will perish, and I will have to explain to them that I failed to convince the one individual capable of saving us because he was, how do you say, too busy tinkering with coffee machines." Henry opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't tell if she was trying to guilt-trip him, or if she genuinely didn't understand sarcasm. Finally, he sighed and stepped back from the window. "Fine," he said. "Come in. But if you turn out to be a scam artist, I'm calling the cops." Solera stepped into the workshop, her movements smooth and almost hypnotic. She glanced around, her gaze lingering on the cluttered workbench and the coffee maker still disassembled in the center. "This is your place of work?" she asked, sounding both impressed and mildly horrified. "Yeah," Henry said, closing the window. "And before you say anything, no, I'm not cleaning up for an alien invasion." Solera's lips quirked into something that might have been a smile. "Noted. Shall we discuss the details of your impending interstellar journey?" Henry groaned and reached for the coffee maker. "Great, just let me fix this thing first. If I'm going to save the galaxy, I'll need caffeine." Henry woke up to the distinct sensation that he'd made a terrible decision. It wasn't the first time. He'd once eaten gas station sushi during a road trip and lived to regret it, but this felt different. Solera was standing in the middle of his workshop, examining a stack of spare parts like an anthropologist might study an ancient ruin. Her silver fingers trailed over the rusted edge of an old carburetor, her expression a blend of fascination and mild horror. "Is this functional?" she asked, holding up a circuit board that looked like it had been through several wars. Henry rolled his eyes as he shuffled to the coffee machine. "Define functional." Solera tilted her head, a motion Henry was beginning to recognize as her version of, "What nonsense are you saying now?" "You know," he said, pouring coffee into a mug adorned with a faded NASA logo, "I'm still not entirely convinced you're not just some elaborate hallucination. Did I accidentally inhale solder fumes last night?" Solera didn't miss a beat. "If I am a hallucination, I am a remarkably consistent one." "Yeah, that's what they all say," Henry muttered, taking a sip of coffee so scalding it briefly made him believe in alternate dimensions. Solera set the circuit board down and turned to him, her expression serious. "Henry Garner, the situation is dire. My people's survival depends on your cooperation. Time is of the essence." Henry leaned against the counter, trying to reconcile the absurdity of the situation. Here he was in his slippers, talking to a shiny alien woman about saving an entire planet. "Okay, let's back up a second. I still don't get why me. Like, out of all the people on Earth, why would you pick the guy whose last major accomplishment was fixing a vending machine?" Solera clasped her hands in front of her, her voice taking on a tone that was almost rehearsed. "You possess a unique blend of ingenuity, resourcefulness, and an intuitive grasp of mechanical systems. Our technology is advanced, but it is failing. We require someone who can think outside the parameters of our understanding." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You rehearsed that, didn't you?" She hesitated, the faintest flicker of something like embarrassment crossing her features. "I may have prepared statements." Henry couldn't help but chuckle. "You aliens really do your homework, huh?" Solera didn't respond, but there was a subtle twitch at the corner of her mouth that might have been the ghost of a smile. "All right," Henry said, setting his mug down. "Let's say I believe you, and that I'm not about to be abducted by a very sophisticated scam artist. What exactly do you want me to do?" Solera stepped closer, her tone growing serious. "Our planet's energy core is a highly sophisticated system that regulates the flow of power across Xynthia. It is faltering. Entire regions of the planet have already succumbed to instability. If the core fails completely, the consequences will be catastrophic. Henry crossed his arms, his mind racing. Okay, but you're talking about alien tech. I wouldn't even know where to start. I'm good with machines, sure, but this sounds way out of my league. Solera's luminous eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something deeply human in them. Hope. We will guide you, I will guide you. He exhaled, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. This is insane. You know that, right? Solera nodded solemnly. By your standards, perhaps, but our desperation leaves us little choice. Henry groaned. Fine. Let's say I go along with this. How are we getting to... Zinthia, was it? I'm guessing you didn't park a spaceship in my driveway. Solera held up the glowing sphere she'd shown him the night before. This device will create a wormhole, allowing us to traverse the necessary distance instantaneously. Henry blinked. A wormhole? Like actual physics-breaking wormhole? You guys just carry those around in your pockets? It is standard issue, Solera said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. Of course it is, Henry muttered. All right, let's do this. But if I die, I'm haunting you. Solera's expression didn't change, but her tone was dry. I accept these terms. The moment Solera activated the device, Henry regretted everything. The workshop dissolved into a swirl of light and sound, as though the universe had been crumpled up like a piece of paper and then smoothed out again. Henry felt like he was falling, spinning, and floating all at once, and somewhere in the chaos, he was pretty sure he heard a faint echo of Never Gonna Give You Up playing in reverse. When the world finally settled, he was lying on his back, staring up at a sky that defied description. It was a kaleidoscope of shifting colors, with 3 moons hanging low on the horizon. Okay, he said, sitting up and rubbing his temples. I think I just invented a new kind of motion sickness. Solera stood nearby, looking perfectly composed. Welcome to Zinthia, she said, gesturing to the alien landscape around them. Henry got to his feet, taking in the towering crystalline structures and the faint bioluminescent glow that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. It was beautiful, but it also felt wrong. There was a strange stillness to the air, as if the planet were holding its breath. Wow, he said, his voice tinged with awe. It's like a screensaver threw up all over the place. Solera tilted her head. I am unfamiliar with this metaphor, but I assume it is complimentary. Sure, Henry said, running a hand over a nearby crystal that thrummed faintly under his touch. Let's go with that. Their moment of relative calm was interrupted by a sudden distant rumble that made the ground vibrate under Henry's feet. He looked at Solera, his expression wary. That's not normal, is it? No, she said, her voice grim. And it will become far worse if we do not act quickly. Henry sighed, already regretting his life choices. Great. Let's go save your planet, but I'm going to need coffee first. Solera raised an eyebrow. Your obsession with this beverage is fascinating. Yeah, well, Henry said, glancing at the alien horizon. You're about to see a lot more where that came from. The first thing Henry noticed as they moved through Zinthia was the sky. It wasn't just a sky. It was a cosmic light show in perpetual motion. Streaks of auroras twisted and danced, painting the horizon in shifting hues of gold and violet. The 3 moons loomed close enough that Henry could almost make out surface details, and he was certain one of them had a ring system made entirely of what looked like sparkling ice crystals. Okay, you win, he said, squinting at the spectacle above. Your planet is officially cooler than Earth, but I still don't see a Starbucks. Solera glanced at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. We do not have Starbucks. That's a shame, Henry said, stepping carefully over what appeared to be a patch of glowing moss. You'd probably get a lot of business with a view like this. Their surroundings were equal parts breathtaking and unsettling. The crystalline structures rising from the ground like jagged skyscrapers shimmered with an inner light, but many of them were cracked or tilted at odd angles. The ground beneath Henry's boots pulsed faintly, as if the planet had a heartbeat, and every so often, a low, ominous rumble echoed in the distance. "So," Henry said, gesturing to the alien landscape, "is it supposed to look like the apocalypse stopped by for a visit, or is this just a bad day?" Salira's silver eyes darkened slightly. "The fractures you see are symptoms of the core's instability. They have been growing worse each cycle. If left unchecked—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the weight of her words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Henry stuffed his hands into the pockets of his jacket, feeling oddly out of place in his earth clothes. "All right, so where's this core of yours? I'm guessing it's not under the nearest rock." "It is located at the planet's nexus," Salira said, pointing toward a distant mountain range that sparkled as though it were made entirely of diamonds. "We will need to travel there to access the core chamber." Henry followed her gaze and let out a low whistle. "Of course it's at the shiny mountains. Nothing about this screams easy trip." Salira began walking, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she were part of the planet itself. Henry trudged after her, feeling every bit like a clunky earthling with his scuffed boots and perpetually messy hair. "So, how long is this trip gonna take?" he asked, stepping over a fissure in the ground that glowed faintly blue. "Approximately 2 rotations," Salira replied. Henry frowned. "Rotations? You mean days?" "Yes," she said, glancing back at him. "Though our cycles are shorter than those of your Earth, approximately 16 hours per rotation." "Great," Henry muttered. 16 hours of hiking. Remind me again why I didn't bring a hoverboard or something?" Salira's expression softened, her tone almost teasing. "Because you did not anticipate interstellar travel when you woke this morning?" "Touché," Henry said, adjusting his pack. Their journey took them through terrain that seemed to defy the laws of physics. One moment, they were crossing a vast plain of grass-like plants that shimmered like liquid metal. The next, they were navigating a forest of towering crystalline spires that hummed faintly as if alive. "Is everything on this planet shiny?" Henry asked, shielding his eyes from the dazzling reflections. "I feel like I'm walking through a jewelry store." Salira allowed herself a small smile. "Our planet's composition is rich in crystalline structures. They are both a source of beauty and a resource for our technology." "Yeah, well, it's a little hard on the eyes," Henry grumbled. Their conversation was interrupted by another rumble, this one closer and louder than before. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Henry staggered, grabbing onto a nearby spire for balance. "What was that?" he asked, his voice tinged with alarm. "Another fissure opening," Salira said, her tone grim. "The core's instability is accelerating." Henry looked around nervously. "So, any chance we can get there faster?" Salira raised her hand, and the glowing sphere she carried pulsed with light. A moment later, a sleek, hovering platform materialized in front of them, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. "You could have summoned this the whole time?" Henry asked, his jaw dropping. Salira stepped onto the platform, her expression serene. "You did not ask." Henry groaned, but climbed aboard, muttering something about show-off aliens. As the platform glided smoothly across the alien landscape, Henry found himself growing increasingly fascinated by the world around him. He asked Salira questions about everything: the shimmering plants, the humming spires, even the sky. "It is beautiful," she admitted, her voice tinged with melancholy. "But it is fragile. Our planet's balance has always been delicate, and now—" She trailed off, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Henry wanted to say something reassuring, but he wasn't sure how to comfort an alien whose planet was literally falling apart. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a granola bar. "Want one?" he asked, holding it out. Salira regarded the offering with curiosity. "What is it?" "Granola bar," Henry said, It's like Earth's version of emergency rations. Not great, but it'll keep you going. She accepted the bar, studying the wrapper as if it were a relic from an ancient civilization. When she finally took a bite, her expression shifted from curiosity to something resembling mild alarm. "This is dense," she said, chewing slowly. Henry laughed. "Yeah, that's granola for you. It's like eating a brick made of oats." Solara didn't respond, but the corners of her mouth twitched upward in the faintest hint of amusement. As the platform approached the base of the sparkling mountains, the air grew noticeably cooler, and the hum of the planet's instability became a constant, low-frequency vibration. "We are close," Solara said, her tone tinged with both relief and urgency. Henry stared up at the towering peaks, their crystalline surfaces refracting the light into 1,000 shimmering rainbows. "I've got a bad feeling about this," he muttered. Solara glanced at him, her expression serious. "You are not alone in that sentiment." With that, the platform slowed to a stop, and the two travelers prepared to begin the final leg of their journey to the core chamber. Henry adjusted his pack and sighed. "All right, shiny lady, lead the way. But if I die, I'm haunting this planet forever." Solara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Duly noted." And with that, they stepped into the heart of the crystalline mountains, where the fate of a world awaited. The crystalline mountains were not what Henry had expected. For starters, they weren't just mountains. They were alive. The shimmering surfaces emitted faint hums that fluctuated in tone as if responding to their presence. Light coursed through the crystal veins like slow-moving rivers, casting intricate patterns across the ground. "Okay," Henry said, craning his neck to look at a particularly tall spire. "I'm calling it now. Your mountains are haunted." Solara, walking ahead with her usual unflappable grace, glanced back at him. "The mountains are not haunted. They are conduits for the planet's energy network. The humming you hear is a byproduct of the energy flow." "Yeah, well," Henry muttered, stepping carefully over a glowing fissure. "I'll feel a lot better once one of them doesn't try to sing to me." As they continued deeper into the crystalline labyrinth, the air grew cooler, and the light from the crystals dimmed, taking on a bluish hue. The hums grew louder and more erratic, like a broken symphony. Henry stopped to examine a smaller crystal jutting out of the ground. It pulsed faintly under his touch, emitting a sound somewhere between a chime and a sigh. "You sure this thing isn't alive? It feels like it's breathing." "In a sense, it is," Solara replied. "The crystals are part of the planet's biomechanical ecosystem. They regulate and distribute energy from the core." Henry squinted at the crystal. "So, they're like planetary arteries?" Solara nodded. "A rudimentary analogy, but accurate." "Great," Henry said, withdrawing his hand quickly. "Now I'm afraid I just gave the planet a blood clot." Solara didn't laugh, but her eyes sparkled with what Henry was beginning to recognize as alien amusement. As their path led to a cavernous opening in the mountain, framed by towering crystalline columns that hummed with a deep resonant tone. Solara paused, her gaze fixed on the entrance. "This is it," she said softly. Henry peered into the cavern, which was bathed in an eerie blue light. The air inside seemed to shimmer, distorting the view like a heat mirage. "So, what's in there? Other than, certain death?" Solara turned to him, her expression unusually solemn. "The core chamber lies beyond this threshold. It is heavily shielded to prevent energy leakage, but the instability has likely damaged the safeguards. Proceed with caution." Henry snorted. "Yeah, caution's my middle name, right after bad decisions." They stepped into the cavern, and Henry immediately felt the difference. The air was heavy, charged with a static-like energy that made his hair stand on end. The walls glowed faintly, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move even when he stood still. "Okay," Henry said, glancing around nervously. "This is officially the creepiest place I've ever been. and I've been to a clown museum. Celera ignored his commentary, her focus entirely on the path ahead. The floor of the cavern sloped downward, leading to a vast chamber that opened up like the inside of a geode. At the center of the chamber stood the core. Henry stopped in his tracks, his jaw dropping. Whoa! The core was a massive spherical construct that floated several feet above the ground. Its surface was a mosaic of shifting colors and textures like liquid metal infused with light. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, emitting bursts of energy that crackled like distant thunder. The entire chamber vibrated with its unstable rhythm. "That's your core?" Henry asked, his voice tinged with awe. Celera nodded. "Yes, and as you can see, it is failing." Henry stepped closer, squinting at the cracks. "It looks like a Christmas ornament that's been through a war. What's it made of?" "Xinthium," Celera replied. "A highly advanced material unique to our planet. It is both a conductor and a stabilizer for the planet's energy." Henry rubbed the back of his neck, his engineering instincts kicking into overdrive. "All right, so what's the plan? Duct tape and hope?" Celera gave him a flat look. "We will need to create a temporary bypass to stabilize the core while we repair the fractures." "Of course," Henry said, "because if there's one thing I love, it's improvising a planetary life support system." As they set to work, Henry couldn't help but marvel at the alien tools Celera provided. One device looked like a tuning fork, but emitted a beam of light that could weld the crystalline structures together. Another resembled a floating jellyfish and appeared to be mapping the cracks in the core. "Your tools are way cooler than mine," Henry admitted, adjusting the settings on the jellyfish scanner. Celera arched an eyebrow. "Your ingenuity is what brought us this far." Henry smirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere, you know." The work was slow and meticulous, and every so often the core emitted a pulse of energy that made the entire chamber tremble. Henry's nerves were frayed, but he found himself cracking jokes to keep the tension at bay. "Hey," he said, holding up the tuning fork device. "What happens if I accidentally weld the wrong thing?" "Do not," Celera said firmly, her gaze never leaving the core. "Noted," Henry muttered. Hours passed, and the cracks in the core slowly began to mend. Celera worked with a precision and focus that Henry could only admire, while he used his knack for improvisation to jury-rig the bypass system. "All right," he said, stepping back to admire his handiwork. "That should hold for now, but we're going to need a permanent fix, or this thing's just going to blow up again." Celera nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The core requires a complete recalibration, but the process is delicate. It will take time." Henry sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Time we don't have, judging by all the rumbling." As if on cue, the chamber shook violently, and a new crack appeared on the core's surface. Celera's eyes widened. "The instability is increasing. We must act quickly." Henry groaned. "Of course, because nothing can ever just go smoothly, can it?" With the core's vibrations growing stronger, the stakes were higher than ever. Henry didn't know if they'd succeed, but one thing was certain. He wasn't about to give up now. "All right, shiny lady," he said, grabbing the tuning fork device. "Let's save your planet." Celera allowed herself a small smile. Together. The chamber quaked as another pulse of energy rippled outward from the core, sending shards of light scattering through the air like a shattered prism. Henry stumbled, catching himself against a nearby crystalline column. "Does this place come with a seatbelt, or are we just winging it?" He called over the increasing hum of the unstable core. Celera was already working with a focus that bordered on obsessive, her hands moving with fluid precision as she manipulated one of the floating jellyfish-like tools. "The bypass is incomplete. We need to stabilize the secondary conduits before proceeding." Henry stared at the cracks creeping across the core's surface. "Define stabilize, because right now it looks like your planet is auditioning for the role of Space Debris No. 7. Celera didn't reply, but her narrowed silver eyes and the subtle tightening of her jaw said it all. They were running out of time. Henry pulled out his multi-tool, a trusty gadget that had been with him since his college days. It wasn't alien tech, but it had saved his skin more times than he cared to count. He flicked through the attachments until he found something that looked vaguely useful, a small arc welder. "All right," he muttered, eyeing a network of crystalline conduits that pulsed erratically like a failing neon sign. "Time to make myself useful." The conduits were delicate, almost spiderweb thin, but they carried the planet's lifeblood of energy. Henry crouched down and began welding a particularly precarious crack, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. "So, Celera," he said, trying to distract himself from the fact that one wrong move might trigger an explosion. "Is this what you aliens do for fun? Fixing planet-sized doomsday machines?" Celera didn't look up. "This is not recreational," she said dryly. Henry smirked. "You're telling me there's no Save the World League back home? No trophies for the fastest planetary repair?" Celera's lips twitched, and Henry took it as a small victory. As the hours ticked by, Henry found himself slipping into a rhythm. The alien tools were intuitive, and he quickly adapted to their unique quirks. Every time the core emitted another destabilizing pulse, he tightened his grip and muttered, "Not today, you glowing death orb." "Henry!" Celera called out, her tone sharper than usual. He looked up to find her pointing at a cluster of conduits high above the chamber floor. They sparked and hissed, sending tendrils of energy arcing through the air. "That doesn't look good," he said, squinting. "Please don't tell me I have to climb up there." Celera handed him a small disc-shaped device. "This will allow you to hover." Henry blinked at the disc. "Hover? You mean like flying?" "Precisely." "Great," he muttered, strapping the device to his belt. "I always wanted to be a human drone." The hover device activated with a soft hum, lifting Henry into the air with surprising stability. "Hey, this isn't so bad," he said, wobbling slightly as he adjusted to the sensation. Kind of like riding a Segway, but with more existential terror. As he approached the sparking conduits, he could feel the heat radiating off them. "Okay, hot wires of doom. Let's see what we're working with here." Henry used the tuning fork-like tool to scan the damage. The readings displayed in midair, holographic numbers and symbols that he didn't fully understand, but instinctively knew how to interpret. "Looks like a bad case of energy reflux," he said, earning a puzzled glance from Celera below. "Don't worry, Dr. Henry's got this." The repair process was tedious, requiring him to seal each fissure while redirecting the energy flow to avoid overload. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his hands ached, but he refused to stop. "Hey, Celera," he called down, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "If we save your planet, do I get, like, a key to the city? Or maybe a statue? Something tasteful, not too showy." Celera glanced up, her expression unreadable. "We do not build statues." Henry feigned disappointment. "No statues? Man, you aliens really know how to crush a guy's dreams." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Henry sealed the last crack in the conduits. The sparking ceased, and the energy flow steadied, pulsing in a smooth, rhythmic pattern. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "All right," he said, descending back to the ground. "That should buy us some time. How's the bypass looking?" Celera gestured to the core, where the fractures were visibly shrinking. "The bypass is functioning as intended. We are stabilizing the core's energy output." Henry grinned. "See? I told you I'm good at this." Before Celera could respond, the core emitted a sudden, high-pitched whine. The chamber trembled violently, and the cracks that had begun to heal flared with blinding light. Henry shielded his eyes. Celera, is this the part where we run?" Celera's expression was grim. "The core is resisting the recalibration. We must act quickly to prevent a total collapse. Henry groaned. Of course, because nothing's ever simple with you people. As the core's instability reached a fever pitch, Solara and Henry worked side by side, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke to the trust they had built. Despite the chaos around them, there was an unspoken understanding. Failure was not an option. When the final adjustment was made, the core emitted a deep resonant hum that shook the chamber. The cracks sealed themselves with a burst of light, and the energy flow stabilized into a steady, harmonious rhythm. Henry collapsed onto the ground, panting. Please tell me that's it. I don't think I've got another save-the-world moment in me. Solara knelt beside him, her expression softening. The core is stable, for now, but there is still much to be done. Henry groaned. Can I at least get a coffee first, or whatever you aliens drink to keep from passing out? Solara tilted her head, considering. We have a restorative beverage made from the nectar of the Lumina flower. Henry raised an eyebrow. Does it taste like coffee? No. Figures. As they left the chamber, the tension that had gripped them began to ease. Henry glanced at Solara and couldn't help but smile. You know, for an alien, you're not so bad. Solara's silver eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. And for a human, you are tolerable. Henry laughed, the sound echoing through the crystalline cavern. Despite the challenges ahead, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They had stabilized the core and, in the process, formed a partnership that might just save an entire world. Henry stretched his legs out on the sleek, translucent bench inside Solara's vessel, which had once again proven itself far more advanced than anything he'd seen on Earth. The faint hum of the ship's systems provided a calming background noise, but it didn't quite distract him from the ache in his back. So, he said, leaning his head against the cushioned wall, how many planetary disasters do I need to fix before I get my honorary alien engineering degree? Solara, seated across from him with her usual elegance, regarded him with a faintly amused expression. You are not yet eligible for our academic accolades. Figures, Henry muttered, stifling a yawn. I'll settle for a really shiny participation trophy. The ship shifted gently, breaking his momentary comfort as it descended toward the shimmering expanse of the Lumina forest. Henry pressed his face to the window, staring at the glowing treetops that pulsed like bioluminescent fireflies. Okay, I'm just going to say it, he began, turning to Solara. Your planet is ridiculously pretty. It's like Pandora from Avatar had a baby with a lava lamp. Solara tilted her head, clearly not following the reference but recognizing his tone. The Lumina forest is one of our planet's most vital ecosystems. It is both beautiful and essential. Let me guess, Henry said. The forest is also breaking down, and we're the only ones who can fix it? Solara's gaze turned serious. Precisely. Of course, he sighed. The Lumina forest was even more breathtaking up close. Trees with crystalline trunks stretched toward the sky, their glowing leaves swaying gently, as though in response to an unseen breeze. The air was filled with a soft, melodic hum, and the ground glimmered underfoot, coated in a moss-like substance that radiated faint warmth. Henry bent down, poking at the moss. Is this stuff edible? Because I skipped lunch. Solara arched an eyebrow. It is not toxic, but its consumption is discouraged. Henry straightened up. Noted. I'll stick to the glowing nectar thing you mentioned earlier. They ventured deeper into the forest, following a path that seemed to shift and shimmer with each step. Henry couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was somehow alive, not just in the traditional sense, but aware. Let me guess, he said, glancing around. The trees are connected to the planet's energy system too, right? Solara nodded. Correct. The forest acts as a natural regulator, channeling and balancing the energy flows from the core to the outer ecosystems. However, the instability in the core has disrupted this balance. If we do not act, the forest will begin to collapse. Henry frowned. And if the forest goes, So does the planet. Precisely. Their destination was a grove at the heart of the forest, where the lumina flowers, small star-shaped blooms that emitted a soft golden light, grew in abundance. According to Solera, these flowers played a crucial role in stabilizing the planet's energy, acting as biological conductors. When they reached the grove, Henry was struck by its almost otherworldly serenity. The flowers floated just above the ground, suspended in the air like tiny suns. Their light danced across the crystalline trees, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that was almost hypnotic. "Wow," he breathed. "This looks like the kind of place you'd bring a date, assuming they don't mind the whole saving the world vibe." Solera didn't respond, her attention focused on the flowers. She knelt and began examining them, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's wrong?" Henry asked, crouching beside her. "The flowers are wilting," Solera said, her voice heavy with concern. "Their connection to the energy network is failing." Henry reached out to touch one of the flowers. It pulsed weakly under his fingertips, its light flickering like a dying ember. "So, how do we fix them? Fertilizer? A pep talk?" Solera gave him a look that suggested she was debating whether or not to dignify his comment with a response. "We must restore their connection to the energy flow. There is a central node beneath this grove, a nexus point for the forest's energy distribution. If we can repair it, the flowers will recover." Henry sighed, getting to his feet. "Of course there's a central node, and let me guess, it's buried under something really inconvenient." Solera nodded. "Approximately 20 meters below the surface." "Fantastic," Henry muttered, pulling out his multi-tool. "Let's dig." The process of unearthing the central node was both exhausting and bizarre. The crystalline soil seemed to resist their efforts, shifting and reforming almost as if it had a mind of its own. "This stuff is alive, isn't it?" Henry said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Technically, yes," Solera replied. "The soil contains symbiotic microorganisms that interact with the planet's energy." "Great," Henry muttered, glaring at the stubborn ground. "I'm fighting a bunch of tiny glowing worms." After what felt like hours, they finally uncovered the node, a large crystalline structure that resembled a pulsating heart. It was cracked and dim, its light barely visible. "All right," Henry said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see if we can jumpstart this thing." Working on the node was a delicate operation. The alien tools Solera provided were incredibly precise, but the node's unstable condition meant one wrong move could spell disaster. "Remind me again why I'm the one doing this?" Henry asked, his voice tense as he carefully welded a crack in the node. "You have an intuitive understanding of systems," Solera said. Henry smirked despite himself. "Flattery won't get you out of helping." Solera handed him another tool, her expression unreadable. "I would not dream of it." Despite the tension, they worked well together, their movements synchronized in a way that made Henry feel oddly connected to her. When the final adjustment was made, the node emitted a low, resonant hum. The cracks sealed themselves with a burst of light, and the energy flow steadied. As the node stabilized, the grove began to transform. The wilting lumina flowers regained their glow, their light growing brighter and steadier. The air seemed to shimmer with renewed vitality, and the forest hummed with a harmonious rhythm. Henry leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. "There," he said, gesturing to the glowing grove. "Your flowers are back in business." Solera studied the grove, her expression softening. "You have done well, Henry." He grinned. "Don't sound so surprised. I told you I'm good at this." For a moment, they stood in silence, surrounded by the serene beauty of the Lumina Grove. Despite the challenges ahead, Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, and maybe even a little hope. "All right," he said, clapping his hands. "What's next? Saving the oceans? Stopping a volcano? I'm on a roll here." Solera's silver eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. "Perhaps a moment of rest is in order." Henry laughed, the sound echoing through the luminous forest. For the first time since this adventure began, he allowed himself to relax, even if just for a moment. The air in the command chamber hummed with anticipation. This was it, the final phase. Henry stood at the control station, its alien interface hovering mid-air in a constellation of shimmering light. The intricate symbols and glyphs pulsed faintly, awaiting his touch. Solara was beside him, her calm exterior betraying a flicker of nervous energy. "So," Henry said, rubbing the back of his neck, "just to confirm, this isn't going to explode if I sneeze on it, right?" Solara arched an eyebrow. "The likelihood of an explosion is minimal if you follow the sequence correctly." "Minimal," Henry repeated, narrowing his eyes. Not exactly the word I wanted to hear before attempting brain surgery on a planet. Solara placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You have come this far, Henry. I trust you." Henry blinked, startled by the sincerity in her voice. "Well," he said, shrugging with a lopsided grin, "that makes one of us." And the control chamber was the beating heart of the alien world, situated at the very center of the core. Transparent walls revealed swirling rivers of energy cascading like molten waterfalls, illuminating the room in an otherworldly glow. The controls were arranged in concentric circles, radiating outward from the central console where Henry stood. "This planet really goes for the dramatic, doesn't it?" he muttered, glancing around. "All it's missing is a big red button labeled Do Not Press." Solara tilted her head, confused. "Why would such a button exist?" "Never mind," Henry said with a smirk. "Cultural differences." Their mission was clear, to synchronize the planet's energy flow by reactivating its ancient regulatory systems. The problem? The systems were partially degraded and required precise manual adjustments, on the fly. "No pressure," Henry muttered as he swiped his hand through the hovering interface, bringing up a diagnostic diagram. The console flared with warnings, each one more ominous than the last. Solara worked quickly at a secondary station, her hands gliding over the controls with practiced ease. "The energy conduits are reaching critical levels," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "You must realign the central flow within the next 5 minutes." "Right," Henry said, cracking his knuckles. "Because nothing says fun like a 5-minute deadline to save an entire planet." As he worked, Henry couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. Just days ago, he'd been an overworked, underappreciated engineer, tinkering with machines on Earth. Now he was on an alien world, using his skills to save an entire civilization. "You know," he said, glancing at Solara, "when I signed up for engineering, I was hoping for a steady 9-to-5 gig. Maybe a coffee machine in the break room. Definitely not this." Solara glanced at him, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "And yet you excel." Henry couldn't help but grin. "Yeah, well, don't get used to it. After this, I'm retiring to a beach planet, preferably one without a core in need of fixing." The console emitted a low, insistent tone, signaling a critical alignment error. "Uh-oh," Henry said, his fingers flying over the interface. "We've got a misfire in Conduit 7. Can you reroute it?" Solara's hands moved in a blur. "Attempting now. The flow is unstable. Be ready to compensate." The room shook as a pulse of energy surged through the conduits, rattling the transparent walls. Henry swore under his breath, gripping the console to steady himself. "Is this normal?" he shouted over the rising hum. "Define normal," Solara replied, her voice remarkably steady. Henry let out a short laugh despite the chaos. "You're getting the hang of human sarcasm. I'm so proud." With seconds to spare, Henry initiated the final sequence. The interface responded with a cascade of light, the symbols aligning into a perfect spiral. The energy conduits pulsed in unison, their chaotic rhythm smoothing into a steady, harmonious flow. The chamber grew quiet, the vibrations subsiding as the planet's energy stabilized. Henry let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, slumping against the console. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Solara studied the readouts, her expression softening. "It is done." Henry let out a laugh, equal parts relief and exhaustion. "Well, that was easy." Solara arched an eyebrow. "Your definition of easy is peculiar." As they exited the control chamber, the planet seemed to come alive around them. The crystalline structures glowed with renewed vigor, and the air hummed with a vibrant energy. The transformation was breathtaking. Henry stared in awe. "I guess this is the part where you tell me the planet's going to be okay." Solara nodded. "The systems are stable. Our world will heal." He turned to her, a smirk on his face. "So, when do I get my thank you parade? Or do you guys not do those either?" Solara's silver eyes sparkled with amusement. "We do not, but I can offer my personal gratitude." Henry held up a hand. "I'll take it, but if you ever need me to fix another planet, I'm raising my rates." And the days that followed were a whirlwind of celebration and bittersweet farewells. Solara's people expressed their gratitude in their own quiet, dignified way, presenting Henry with a crystalline artifact that hummed faintly when touched. "It is a token of our appreciation," Solara explained as she handed it to him. "A reminder of your impact here." Henry studied the artifact, a smile tugging at his lips. "You know, this might actually look good on my coffee table, assuming I ever make it home." Solara's expression grew somber. "You have a home here, should you choose to stay." Henry looked at her, surprised by the offer. "Thanks, but I think I've got some unfinished business back on Earth. Plus, someone's got to tell my boss I quit in the coolest way possible." When the time came to leave, Solara accompanied him to the ship. As they stood on the glowing platform, surrounded by the beauty of her world, Henry found himself at a loss for words. "Solara," he began, "this has been insane, terrifying, completely out of my league, and also kind of amazing." Solara inclined her head. "Your presence here has made all the difference, Henry." He grinned. "Don't get all mushy on me now. You'll ruin your stoic alien vibe." Her lips curved into a rare smile. "Goodbye, Henry." As the ship ascended, Henry watched the planet shrink below him, its glowing surface a testament to everything they had accomplished. He leaned back in his seat, holding the crystalline artifact in his hands, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he'd truly made a difference, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready for whatever came next.